Look around. Many older workers are staying in the labor force longer, millennials are buried in student debt, and Gen Z is sketching out second careers before even landing their first job. In 2025, retirement is starting to look less like a clean exit and more like a group project no one volunteered for. Surveys show that large shares of employees now expect to keep working past retirement age, so the fantasy of endless leisure feels more distant than ever. But hidden in this mess are experiments that might shift the rules: cash stipends, shorter workweeks, and even government-funded rest breaks. In this video, you'll see why retirement is changing, who's bearing the brunt, and 3 practical moves you can take today. To get there, though, it helps to first ask a simple question. Was retirement ever the guaranteed escape it was sold to be? Why retirement was never guaranteed? For most of the 20th century, retirement was framed as a tidy final act. You put in decades of work, then collect a pension or tap savings, and replace office meetings with leisure and travel. It seemed secure, almost natural, as if life itself promised a closing chapter of rest. In reality, retirement was not a built-in guarantee, but a policy construct that depended on very specific economic and demographic assumptions. A century ago, most workers never lived long enough to reach their 60s, and when governments created pension systems, they assumed far fewer years of payouts than what we face now. The expectation of decades of leisure was built on fragile math from the start. Consider the design. When countries like Germany or the United States set retirement near age 65, average life expectancy was barely higher. The system worked largely because workers who paid in often collected benefits for only a handful of years. Today, people commonly live into their 80s, with global life expectancy more than 20 years higher than it was in the early 20th century. Even more striking, research shows that while people are living longer, their healthy working years are not expanding at the same rate. This shift magnifies the pressure on public and private systems alike. More years of payouts, with fewer contributors to foot the bill. What originally seemed like a sustainable formula now shows its limits. For workers who counted on a well-timed handoff into retirement, the numbers no longer add up. Pensions once served as the dependable safety net, built around long-term employer-employee relationships and union protections. That structure has eroded. Many companies replaced formal pensions with individual savings accounts, transferring responsibility from employers to workers. On paper, this sounded like empowerment. In practice, it created stark divisions between those with disposable income to save and those perpetually strapped. Without steady wage growth, and with housing, healthcare, and education costs spiraling higher, saving adequately became out of reach for the majority. Household budgets illustrate the strain. The one-income families that once managed to set aside money for retirement have been replaced by households where multiple jobs keep the lights on but leave little left over. A narrow minority meet the benchmarks financial advisors recommend, while most approach retirement age with savings that would sustain only a few years, not decades. For these workers, the issue is no longer whether retirement might be comfortable, but whether it can last at all. At the same time, state-run systems have their own fractures. Programs like Social Security and national pensions rely on steady inflows from younger workers, but birth rates have fallen and immigration alone cannot compensate. Governments project trillions in unfunded liabilities, meaning promises made today outrun the money available tomorrow. A small change, like raising retirement age by 2 or 3 years, often sparks sweeping protests, a reminder of just how tense and fragile the balance has become. The idea of carefree golden years collides directly with uncomfortable fiscal arithmetic. The origin of these promises helps explain today's backlash. Retirement systems were never natural laws. They were built experiments layered onto industrial economies that presumed continuous growth and expanding workforces. As those conditions weaken, the gaps widen. Increasing numbers of people in their 70s still turn up in job applications, not out of preference but out of necessity. These headlines highlight a reality in which age no longer marks the end of labor, but merely shifts the type of work one can access. Part of the cultural frustration comes from expectation itself. For decades, social campaigns and employer materials depicted retirement as inevitable: hammocks, golf courses, freedom earned through steady years at the office. This imagery embedded the idea that rest was guaranteed. But those promises were less about certainty and more about aspiration. Tied to unstable assumptions about demographics and growth, they were always contingent. Now, with inflation weakening savings and medical costs eating larger shares of household income, that aspirational model becomes untenable for all but a privileged few. By 2025, the illusion has worn thin. Governments are raising retirement ages because economic shortfalls leave little alternative. Even countries considered financially stable now acknowledge looming deficits. The conclusion is difficult but unavoidable. Retirement was not a permanent fixture of modern society. It was and remains a policy arrangement, one sustained by favorable conditions that no longer exist in the same form. For today's workers, the realization shapes both attitudes and behavior. Younger generations see their elders staying in the workforce long past the point they once expected to leave, often because they cannot afford to stop. Older generations, instead of traveling or pulling back, extend their careers to balance budgets. The cultural story of an automatic, graceful transition out of the labor force no longer matches economic conditions. Retirement now functions less as a switch and more as a continuum. People reduce hours if they can, or supplement inadequate support with contract work or part-time jobs. The essential insight here is that the fragility of retirement is not new. It's just become impossible to ignore. Longer lifespans, rising costs, and shrinking contributions exposed flaws hidden for decades. For some, retirement can still deliver comfort, but for the majority, it is moving further away from entitlement and closer to survival strategy. That's why more and more workers recognize that institutions like pensions or Social Security alone cannot guarantee their security. And once you accept that old structures can't carry everyone, another pressing question emerges. What happens to the growing number of people working outside those systems in the first place? The gig economy versus the pension promise. How do you plan a retirement when the work itself never came with a seat at the table? That's the challenge of the gig economy, where millions of people spend years driving passengers, delivering groceries, coding websites, or walking dogs without ever earning the status of employee. No contracts with benefits, no payroll accounts, just apps, ratings, and deposits that stop the moment the work stops. The old pension promise once symbolized long-term security, but an entire slice of today's workforce was never connected to it to begin with. The pitch of gig work is freedom, flexible hours, independence from bosses, and instant entry to income with little more than a smartphone. For people juggling responsibilities or seeking side earnings, it can look appealing. But the trade-off is severe. Each completed task comes without the employer contributions that built the traditional retirement system. No pension credits, no subsidized health insurance, no accumulated promises stretching into old age. Flexibility arrives at the price of stability, and stability is exactly what retirement relies on. Research shows tens of millions of workers in the United States alone now earn income primarily through gig platforms, and most lack access to employer-sponsored retirement plans. That makes the structural issue clear. Without payroll deductions, without employer matches, and with irregular income flows, it's far harder to accumulate savings consistently. A gig worker may know they should put money aside, but the scaffolding that once made saving automatic is absent. Year after year, earnings get used for rent, food, and expenses, leaving little left in reserve. To younger viewers in this position, one practical move matters. Automate at least one recurring transfer to a Roth IRA or SEP IRA. Treat it like rent you can't skip. That single habit creates the closest thing to predictability inside an unpredictable income stream. The absence of pensions is only part of the challenge. Healthcare in many economies ties heavily to formal employment. Gig workers either purchase insurance outright, absorb high deductibles, or risk going without coverage. Tax systems add another burden. Self-employment taxes, complex filings, and quarterly payments turn what might appear to be steady income into a tangle of financial management. Without the built-in efficiencies of payroll deductions, even those who want to prepare for the future end up stretched thin. Over time, the gap between traditional employees and gig workers compounds into dramatically different retirement outcomes. This scale is not just anecdotal. The proportion of workers spending a majority of their time in gig roles rivals the size of entire industries that once dominated labor. And while the workforce composition has shifted, the benefits infrastructure has not. Pensions and social insurance schemes were constructed in an era of industrial stability, long tenures, and unions. That brokered protections. By contrast, in today's contract-heavy labor market, that scaffolding no longer reaches large swaths of the population. A system that depended on steady contributions from lifetime careers was never designed to function when job arrangements change weekly. Governments are aware but slow to react. Policies built around traditional employment often exclude gig workers by classifying them as independent contractors. Some legislatures have passed or proposed rules reclassifying certain gig workers as employees, but enforcement varies and resistance from platforms is strong. Other experiments test portable benefits, systems where contributions attach to the worker rather than the employer. The most visible effort in the United States is the spread of state-run auto-IRA programs, like California's CalSavers, which automatically enroll workers without employer plans into basic retirement accounts. Early signs show higher participation rates than voluntary programs, suggesting the potential to close at least part of the gap. Yet the scale is still too limited to offset the structural erosion gig work has created. For the millions already dependent on platforms, the lived consequences are stark. Retirement ages blur, and there is no natural end point. A rideshare driver may continue logging in well into their 70s because no pension or savings balance steps in to replace that income. The end comes not with a farewell celebration, but when health and strength decline to the point that more shifts are impossible. Retirement becomes less a milestone reached and more a forced stop dictated by physical limits. The entrepreneurial framing of gig labor reinforces this tension. Platforms often describe their workers as micro-business owners, masters of their own schedules. In principle, independence sounds empowering. In practice, most of these so-called businesses cannot convert into sustainable enterprises. A single driver cannot negotiate bulk insurance. A single delivery worker cannot bargain for a retirement match. What looks like flexibility is really the atomization of risk. Risk previously shared by corporations and governments, now handed down to individuals who often lack safety nets to absorb it. This shift also reshapes cultural expectations around retirement. In the mid-20th century model, long service at a company carried a clear pivot point: retirement parties, pension checks, and a new identity beyond the workforce. In contrast, gig work provides no boundary. People may enter rideshare, freelancing, or delivery intending it as temporary, but remain for decades as costs and obligations prevent exits. Approaching their 60s, they discover not a new chapter of leisure, but a mirror of their earlier years. Still hustling, only older and with fewer options. Financial consequences follow. Without automatic savings structures, many gig workers arrive at midlife with minimal retirement provision. Public assistance programs then absorb more strain, adding millions of underprepared retirees into already stressed systems. Policy fixes exist: auto-IRAs, expanded portable benefits, more aggressive reclassification of certain gig roles, but adoption is uneven. While legislators debate, individuals absorb the impact directly, with retirement security tied less to merit or effort and more to structural access they never received. For individuals, the situation often looks like this. A worker who once might have expected a modest pension after decades with a company now faces only the continuation of gig work. Illnesses, reduced demand, or simple exhaustion expose that continuation as unsustainable. Some shift to smaller online tasks. Others lean on family support. Many just keep grinding until they can no longer. In each case, the clear pathway once symbolized by pensions and statutory retirement ages has dissolved, replaced by indefinite activity until forced to stop. The essential problem is that retirement in this context isn't planned, it's imposed. Gig workers effectively retire when their bodies or circumstances remove the option of continued labor, not when savings or systems provide a handoff. That distinction underscores the widening gap between the pension promise and the platform reality. Those who once had flawed but tangible guarantees now face mostly personal improvisation. And this fundamental insecurity in the gig economy doesn't stay within that group alone. Its ripple effects appear everywhere, on public insurance systems, on family support networks, and eventually inside traditional labor markets too. What once looked like an alternative career path has grown into a major segment of the economy, one with no built-in transition out of work. Which raises a new question. If even those who never expected pensions struggle to stop working, what happens when people who actually counted on retirement are also drawn back into the labor force? Unretirement, the comeback nobody wanted, Unretirement, what some call the comeback nobody wanted, is now shaping daily life for millions. Instead of a hard stop, retirement is increasingly interrupted by a return to the labor force. Recent data show that in 2024, employment among people aged 55 and older rose to more than 37% in some reports, underscoring how common this shift has become. For many, unretirement is not about curiosity or novelty, but necessity. The reasons are blunt. Inflation steadily erodes budgets, making once modest retirement plans inadequate. Housing, healthcare, and food prices climb faster than pension payments or fixed savings accounts can keep pace. A retiree who thought their nest egg might stretch comfortably over 2 decades finds withdrawals accelerating, with balances thinning by their late 60s or 70s. Paychecks earned after retirement become less about travel or hobbies and more about paying utility bills and covering pharmacy purchases. Retirement, once imagined as leisure, bends back into routine labor because expenses don't wait. Savings shortfalls magnify the pressures. While many financial guidelines suggest retirees enter with balances sufficient to replace 70 to 80% of pre-retirement income, large numbers fall short of those targets. Medical emergencies drain what little is saved. Family responsibilities further compress budgets. Adult children leaning on older relatives for help, or college tuitions extending far beyond what parents anticipated 40 years earlier. In this context, returning to work is less a choice than a safety valve, plugging urgent gaps that public programs or private accounts can't cover. Longer lifespans compound everything. Retiring at 65 once meant planning for perhaps 10 to 15 years of expenses. In 2025, it's common to anticipate 25 or more. Outliving savings has shifted from a rare miscalculation to an expected outcome. Each extra year is another year of income that must come from somewhere, be it depleted savings, public benefits, or part-time employment. Employers facing labor shortages find retirees stepping into positions, even if those positions involve low-wage service jobs, rather than the consulting or passion work many envisioned. Living longer, paradoxically, becomes a financial burden rather than purely a gift. The quality of the jobs themselves underscores the contradictions of unretirement. Few older workers find senior advisory roles or cushioned part-time consulting gigs. Instead, they often re-enter through the lowest rungs: cashiers, stock clerks, rideshare drivers, call center representatives. For those who once built substantial careers, the contrast is sobering. Pride yields quickly to necessity. The idea of retirement as dignity and reward fades when the only available roles demand long shifts on one's feet or minimum wages that barely cover necessities. The physical impact can be severe. Older bodies cope less easily with the demands of repetitive labor or erratic schedules. A retiree who returns to shift work often strains health further, which in turn escalates medical costs, the very expenses driving them back into the workforce. Work pays for medicine, but the work itself can make medical intervention more frequent, trapping people in a cycle that ends not with satisfaction but with exhaustion. Unretirement has scaled beyond anecdotes. Surveys suggest that in certain economies, nearly a quarter of retirees return to paid work within 5 years of leaving their original jobs. Motivations vary. While financial strain dominates responses, some cite the need for structure or social contact. In practice, income pressures and rising living costs remain the decisive forces. Describing unretirement solely as staying busy downplays the economic urgency driving most of these decisions. Employers view the trend pragmatically. Industries with chronic turnover, retail, transportation, healthcare support, gain from older workers willing to take consistent shifts. Their reliability stands out in sectors where younger workers might cycle in and out quickly. The irony is stark. Retirement systems that once promised relief from labor now supply employers with older, flexible part-timers. The very end point that should have reduced reliance on the workforce instead establishes a new labor reserve. The cultural meaning of retirement shifts with this pattern. Once it carried a clear boundary: the party, the pension, the transition into volunteering or grandparenting. Today, retired often comes with an asterisk. Many still tutor, staff front desks, or drive part-time. Retirement no longer signals a firm end but a softer, more ambiguous identity. The idea of a clean life stage dissolves, leaving a hybrid half-work, half-retire existence that stretches on indefinitely. Emotionally, the toll is heavy. Many older adults feel blindsided that decades of contributions or careful savings aren't enough. They expected certainty, but face the need to reapply for jobs, compete with younger applicants, and adjust to roles they never imagined. The frustration of downward mobility, working jobs far below one's former status, cuts against the hope of dignity in later years. Income brings short-term stability, but doesn't erase the demoralizing sense of a finish line redrawn without warning. Families also adjust under the weight of unretirement. Instead of passing wealth to younger generations, parents often continue laboring to cover their own needs. Children watch older relatives return to workplaces rather than enjoy freed time. Household expectations of inheritance or leisure are rewritten as daily reminders of financial strain. Retirement as a legacy stage collapses when grandparents are stocking store shelves or driving late-night routes rather than passing along resources. For a small group, returning to paid work does deliver benefits, structure, community, renewed purpose. But framing unretirement as lifestyle improvement misses the larger truth. For the majority, it emerges from economic constraint. Inflation, inadequate savings, and extended lifespans intersect to make paid employment an older age routine. The broad cultural promise of rest after years of work becomes, for many, another phase of employment with shorter breaks in between. Those already in retirement face the cycle directly, but mid-career and late-career viewers can act preemptively. If you consider going back to work after retiring, look closely at how extra earnings may increase your Medicare premiums or trigger Social Security withholding under the earnings test. Even part-time wages can alter net outcomes in ways that surprise many older workers. Understanding these rules ahead of time helps avoid setbacks that undo the benefit of rejoining the workforce. The persistence of unretirement demonstrates a permanent shift. Endurance doesn't stop at age 65, nor at 70. It stretches further each year, driven by both necessity and opportunity. Survival overrides ceremony, reshaping retirement into cycles of exit and return, with no fixed conclusion. For many, work has become open-ended, extending deep into ages once imagined as rest. Yet this extension doesn't always depend on traditional jobs in physical workplaces. New forms of labor, made possible by technology, change how age and employment interact. And that raises another paradox. Whether tools designed to replace human effort could also be the ones that keep us laboring longer than ever. AI and remote work are stretching careers. Technology itself is reshaping later careers, and nowhere is that clearer than with AI and remote work. Far from eliminating the human role entirely, these tools are extending how long people can remain part of the workforce. They reduce the need for commuting, lighten physical strain, and automate routine tasks, creating conditions where older workers can continue contributing well beyond the traditional retirement age. The twist is that AI does not operate in one direction. It makes some jobs easier, replaces others outright, and leaves the rest in a state of constant change. When automation first hit headlines, predictions leaned toward mass displacement. Manufacturing lines without people, customer service without humans, classrooms without teachers. But the picture in 2025 looks less like full replacement and more like selective reconfiguration. AI helps some older workers stay productive, especially in white-collar roles where knowledge and judgment matter. At the same time, many younger workers find parts of their junior tasks, data entry, document review, scheduling, now handled faster by machines. The technology removes entry-level stepping stones, but props up senior professionals with support that boosts output. That duality keeps careers alive longer, but slows down advancement beneath them. Data underscores the scale. Studies suggest that generative AI could automate up to about 30% of work hours in certain developed economies by 2030. But automation is not evenly distributed. Physical labor in warehouses or healthcare support still requires human presence, while roles focused on analysis, communication, and oversight see the deepest levels of AI augmentation. Where the burden is computational, the system thrives on efficiency. Where the burden is physical, it still falls on bodies. For someone in their 70s, this difference is critical. It means remote office work can continue indefinitely while manual jobs still force a stop. A short example highlights how the shift plays out. In healthcare, diagnostic systems now analyze imaging with speed and accuracy that rivals specialists. Doctors still make the final judgment, But AI narrows possibilities, flags anomalies, and shortens the path to treatment decisions. The result isn't doctors disappearing, but older specialists keeping up their pace without burning out. In law, contract analysis powered by language models allows senior attorneys to focus on interpretation, negotiation, and strategy. Instead of stepping aside at retirement age, they continue billing hours with the support of systems that never rest. For remote work in general, the change is structural. In 2020, working from home was a crisis adaptation. By mid-decade, it is a permanent feature of employment landscapes. That permanence means jobs once closed off by physical distance or health limits are now open longer into old age. A teacher may no longer manage an entire classroom, but can tutor dozens of students virtually. A marketing professional who once traveled frequently can now design campaigns from their living room. Combined with AI's back-end help, drafting slides, transcribing meetings, summarizing client calls, the scope of effort shrinks just enough that continued participation looks feasible even into very late life. This is not without trade-offs. Younger workers see career rungs held stagnant. Institutions depend on years of turnover to create room, but turnover slows when departing employees no longer depart. Promotions and pay raises stall, and the sense of waiting in line grows sharper.